There are moments in MotoGP when noise itself seems to listen, when the roar of 1,000 horsepower engines bows before the weight of a single voice. Carlo Pernat's voice. Bravelo, scarred by decades of pit lane cigarette smoke and unfiltered truth, carries the sound of experience. A man who's seen legends built in wind tunnels and destroyed in one wrong corner. To him, Toprak Razgatlıoğlu's leap into MotoGP isn't courage. It's Russian roulette disguised as destiny. The paddock calls it ambition. Pernat calls it miscalculation wrapped in charisma. He looks at Yamaha's V4 prototype, half-born and half-obsolete, and sees not a beginning, but a warning steel and carbon whispering of a factory chasing ghosts faster than grip. He doesn't see just a rider. He sees a test case for fate itself, a genius breaking 3 meters deeper than physics allows, trusting feel over data, heart over telemetry. Toprak's timing is wrong, he says quietly, almost like a prayer. His MotoGP dream could become a nightmare. Around him, mechanics measure tire pressures, journalists measure words, and yet it's Pernat who measures time, the invisible lap between greatness and regret. He knows how Michelin rubber bites differently from Pirelli, how half a degree of steering angle can separate prophecy from obituary. He knows that Yamaha, obsessed with its V4 salvation, might leave its newest messiah to fight with an engine gasping for relevance. And somewhere in that brutal calculus of torque and destiny, he feels both pity and admiration for the Turkish rider who dares to challenge inevitability. Because if Toprak wins, he will rewrite physics and silence history. But if he falls, if he folds under the weight of promises written in corporate ink and erased in pit lane reality, then Carlo Pernat's words will linger in the exhaust haze like a requiem for those who believe that passion alone could outrun timing. And so, beneath the low hum of generators and whisper predictions, the storm that Pernat foresaw began to gather its first quiet breath, the calm before everything changed. The MotoGP paddock trembles not with the sound of engines, but with expectation, a low hum beneath the chatter of journalists, and the glint of cameras waiting for the next seismic shift. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu walks through the Yamaha hospitality like a man carrying invisible weight, the air thick with curiosity and doubt. His every step echoes through conversations that stop mid-sentence, as if even the espresso machines are holding their breath. Personally, I would have advised Razgatlıoğlu to postpone the arrival by a year. Carlo Pernat murmurs, his voice cutting through the noise like the edge of a mechanic's spanner dropped on concrete. The words spread faster than data through a telemetry feed, ricocheting off walls and whispered again and again by those who love prophecy almost as much as racing. The young Turkish rider adjusts his gloves, his eyes unfocused for a moment. What if I'm stepping into a storm I can't control? The thought lingers, then disappears behind his habitual half-smile, the armor of champions who learn to lie to their own fear. Outside, technicians test sensors on a Yamaha M1 frame stripped to its bones, its aluminum gleaming like a surgical instrument ready for a risky operation. The journalists note the change, a subtle modification in the steering geometry, a sign that Yamaha is already rewriting its own past. It feels lighter, one engineer confides quietly, but not yet alive. The air smells of new carbon fiber and nervous ambition. The moment feels suspended, like the pause before a piano note lands, neither silence nor music yet. Pernat watches from a distance, eyes narrowing, calculating every variable, age, tires, timing, destiny. He's seen it before, riders who mistook momentum for readiness, dreams for direction. His cigarette burns slow, an old-school metronome of skepticism. Asterisk, they're building a myth before the first lap, he thinks, and myths are heavy to carry into a corner at 300 kilometers an hour. The metaphorical tide rises unseen. Conversations turn from admiration to anticipation, from admiration to warning. A mechanic drops a torque wrench, and the clang sounds like a gunshot in the stillness. It's not courage that wins MotoGP, Pernat says softly to no one in particular. It's timing. Somewhere deep inside, Toprak breathes once, steady and deliberate, feeling the faint vibration of a future still untested. The calm doesn't last long. It never does in this world where speed writes prophecy, and every silence hides a scream waiting to begin. And as twilight settles over the paddock, the storm begins to form, quietly, invisibly, and entirely around him. Timing in MotoGP is as fragile as grip on a damp curb at turn 13, and Carlo Pernat knows it better than anyone. He leans forward during an interview, voice low but sharp enough to cut through static. Toprak will join MotoGP in 2026, the final year on Michelin tires. By 2027, the championship will switch to Pirelli, the tires he knows best. The words hang like engine heat in the afternoon air, curling around every paddock whisper and sponsor's smile. To the untrained ear, it sounds like a technical note, but inside the factories it detonates like a small truth bomb. Why now? Toprak asks himself later, alone in his motorhome, fingers tracing the ridge of his helmet. Why not wait one more season and meet the future on my own ground? He knows the answer because heroes never arrive on schedule. A little-known detail emerges from Yamaha's testing division. The 2026 M1 will use a transitional chassis optimized for the last Michelin spec, with asymmetric front stiffness that resists Toprak's brutal braking style. Engineers call it a compromise. Pernat calls it a trap. The journalist in him writes headlines in his mind before they're printed. The paddock smells of rain and rubber, and the talk of tires turns almost theological. Every mechanic has an opinion. Every veteran has a prediction. Every sponsor just wants certainty that no one can sell. It's madness, Pernat repeats, flicking ash into the silence. 1 year spent adapting to Michelins will be wasted, just as everything resets. The image is perfect. A rider climbing a ladder that vanishes just as he reaches the top rung. Yamaha's strategy department defends the choice with spreadsheets and simulations, numbers that look solid until you remember the sport is made of flesh, fear, and fractions of seconds. Toprak listens but says nothing, feeling the paradox tighten around him like leather shrinking under sun. The metaphor of his career becomes an hourglass turned too early, grains falling before the right race begins. On track, he imagines the first corner on Michelin fronts, softer carcass, different carcass deflection, and senses how the braking zone will feel shorter, crueler, more uncertain. I will learn it my way, he whispers, defiant yet uncertain whether the line between bravery and recklessness still exists. The journalists write about destiny, but inside the garage, destiny looks a lot like tire pressure charts and telemetry graphs no one fully trusts. Pernat closes his notebook, convinced history is repeating in slow motion. A champion's rhythm, he says with the calm of experience, can be broken before it even begins. And in that instant, the trap is set, invisible yet absolute. In the sterile brilliance of Yamaha's test garage, the new V4 hums like an unspoken promise wrapped in aluminum, yet its heartbeat feels unfinished, a prototype dreaming of perfection. The engineers move around it like priests in blue overalls, whispering to screens that pulse with telemetry rather than prayer. Outside, the paddock talks about revolution. Inside, the air smells of oil, solder, and fear disguised as progress. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu knows the myth of the new era is seductive, but myths don't always start engines. Carlo Pernat's words still echo over the clatter of torque wrenches. We have to see if in 2026 he'll already ride a Yamaha projected to 2027 or still this outdated version. I hope for him that he received the right guarantees like Fabio Quartararo definitely did. That line lands heavier than any crash. Guarantees. Toprak wonders in silence. In MotoGP, what is guaranteed except pain and data? He studies the bike like a puzzle where one piece always refuses to fit. The technical sheets reveal a small but crucial change. The new crankshaft offset is 2 millimeters forward, chasing balance at the cost of character. It's the kind of detail that separates belief from betrayal, and Pernat knows it. If he gets the old engine, he says later, he'll be racing ghosts while Quartararo rides tomorrow's machine. The metaphor hits. Yamaha stands at a desert's edge, chasing a mirage of its former greatness, engines flickering like heat on asphalt. Toprak senses it too. The M1 feels elegant but hollow, like a violin perfectly tuned but missing its soul. He presses the throttle during testing, and for a moment the bike responds with deceptive grace before coughing on exit, a fraction late, a fraction wrong. It's breathing its last, mutters a mechanic, watching the RPM data flatten where it should sing. The journalists call it transition. The insiders call it chaos disguised as innovation. Pernat leans against the pit wall, arms folded, eyes narrowing into the past he's seen too often. He recognizes the pattern. The crossroads where ambition outruns preparation, where riders become collateral for corporate evolution. Too late for the old, too early for the new, he thinks, shaking his head slowly. Toprak returns to the box, visor up, eyes quiet yet burning, aware that the machine beneath him is not a partner but a question. And as the V4 prototype's hum fades into silence, the mirage shimmers once more, close enough to chase, never close enough to trust. There is a silence that lives inside Yamaha's factory, a mechanical melancholy that no dyno can measure. The corridors once rang with laughter and rivalry. Now only the hiss of compressed air answers the hum of fluorescent lights. Carlo Pernat feels it immediately when he visits, an atmosphere too polished, too quiet, like a museum displaying speed rather than creating it. Yamaha is trudging along, he says gravely. They're now working on the V4 engine, leaving aside the development of the current engine, which is now at the end of its run. It isn't just criticism, it's diagnosis. Engineers speak of the V4 like salvation, but they avoid mentioning the hollow feeling that the present has already been abandoned. A bike without soul rides like a violin without strings, Pernat thinks, and the metaphor fits the smell of fading ambition. In a corner, an old M1 engine sits on a test bench, its casing scored from countless revisions, still noble, still outdated. The telemetry screens glow faintly, showing data curves that seem to sigh under their own repetition. Fabio Quartararo walks past mechanics, shoulders heavy, his gestures sharper than his voice. Quartararo realized this, Pernat explains later. Not surprisingly, he seems to have lost his motivation. The champion's eyes tell a story that words cannot, of corners taken perfectly, yet feeling meaningless. A little-known detail circulates among insiders. Yamaha has halted updates to the 2025 Aero package, diverting funds entirely to the V4's cooling architecture. Innovation is now a substitute for direction. Toprak watches from the sidelines, torn between reverence and apprehension. Is this what greatness looks like before it collapses? He wonders, his thoughts drifting like tire smoke after a burnout. The factory is still magnificent, but its rhythm feels off, like a metronome running on tired batteries. Pernat senses decay not in performance sheets, but in the way people stop believing their work can still change history. Yamaha, once a symphony of precision and passion, now plays out of tune. And as the lights dim over the empty workshop, he knows that decline doesn't arrive with a crash. It seeps in quietly, like dust settling on forgotten trophies. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu's arrival in MotoGP feels less like a debut and more like an invasion of energy into a world already exhausted by its own precision. He walks through Yamaha's garage surrounded by strangers who smile with their mouths but measure him with their eyes. Every movement he makes, every handshake, every silence, is dissected by cameras and colleagues alike. He isn't just a rider. He's a symbol, a nation's roar condensed into a single heartbeat. The weight of expectation clings to him like humidity before a storm, heavy and invisible. I'm not here to belong, he tells himself in the mirror. I'm here to rewrite the rhythm. His eyes harden. The smile that follows isn't arrogance. It's defiance sculpted by years of disbelief. Toprak's timing is wrong. His MotoGP dream could become a nightmare. Carlo Pernat warns again, his tone both pitying and prophetic. The paddock listens, half hopeful, half cruel, as if daring destiny to prove him right. Yamaha's staff move between loyalty and politics, their gestures cautious, their conversations edited by fear of hierarchy. A little-known fact spreads quietly. Toprak's contract includes a clause allowing direct access to data analysis sessions, something rarely granted to newcomers. It's a weapon, but also a declaration of independence. The metaphor fits him perfectly, a flame trapped inside glass, brilliant yet suffocating. Every evening, as the circuit empties, he sits on the pit wall listening to the distant rumble of transport trucks, the heartbeat of a sport that never truly sleeps. They think politics can tame me, he says softly to his crew chief over coffee, but I've danced with chaos before. He laughs, though the sound carries fatigue more than joy. Pernat, watching from afar, can almost admire the madness. It's the kind he's seen in every great rider before the fall. He's gambling not with his career, the old man thinks, but with his identity. The season hasn't started, yet the real race between belief and conformity has already begun. And as dawn rises over the paddock, Toprak's silhouette cuts through the mist like a blade that refuses to dull, sharp enough to draw blood from the future itself. In MotoGP, politics doesn't live in press conferences. It hides in contract clauses and boardroom silences, and Yamaha's latest maneuver reeks of quiet panic. The decision to trigger the brake clause for Jack Miller sent tremors through the paddock, a move driven less by strategy than by fear of falling further behind. Experience, they claimed, was priceless, loyalty disposable. They're betting on Miller's V4 knowledge, Carlo Pernat muttered, not on Toprak's superbike instincts. The statement dripped with irony, the kind that only veterans understand after decades of watching factories sacrifice tomorrow for the illusion of control. In truth, Yamaha's internal war had already begun. Engineers divided between the old inline-4 romantics and the V4 revolutionaries whispering about aero evolution. The politics of progress had become a minefield. A minor but telling detail emerged during contract negotiations. Miller's deal included first access to V4 simulation data, a privilege denied to Toprak despite his future as Yamaha's new face. Pernat saw it for what it was, a hierarchy disguised as meritocracy. They want him to learn from the sidelines, Toprak thought bitterly one night, staring at his untouched dinner. But rebellion, for him, was instinctual. He demanded his trusted crew chief, Phil Marin, be brought in from BMW, a request that made Yamaha's board flinch. It's a bold move, one insider whispered, borderline dangerous. The metaphor was apt. In a sea of politics, Toprak was trying to build his own island. Marin's presence promised comfort but also tension, an unspoken challenge to the corporate chain of command. He's walking a tightrope, Pernat warned, watching the power struggle unfold. The engineers smiled politely in meetings, but the air was thick with unspoken rivalry. Trust no one who offers applause too quickly, Toprak reminded himself, tightening the strap of his glove as if sealing a pact. His quiet rebellion turned into a statement. Control isn't granted, it's taken. The season hadn't started, yet Yamaha's real race was already internal. And beneath the glossy press releases, everyone knew the truth. In MotoGP, speed is negotiable, but politics always takes the inside line. The paddock whispers about tires the way poets whisper about fate, softly, reverently, and with a touch of fear. The impending shift from Michelin to Pirelli isn't just a change of rubber. It's a rewriting of physics, a philosophical divide between eras. To Carlo Pernat, it marks the fracture between an old MotoGP that worshipped consistency and a new one that flirts shamelessly with volatility. It's more than technical, he tells a journalist, his eyes half-lidded but burning. It's generational. In 2026, the grid will live its final Michelin year, a countdown to extinction disguised as progress. Every engineer knows the implications. Corner entry feedback will alter, temperature windows will tighten, carcass deformation will change braking zones by meters. A little-known internal Yamaha report predicts up to a 9% variance in wear rate under aggressive braking, numbers that could make or break Toprak's style. He reads the summary quietly, jaw set. They're building a future I can't touch yet, he thinks, frustration simmering beneath his calm. The metaphor becomes clear. MotoGP is a chessboard where one side plays with tomorrow's pieces while the other moves ghosts. Yamaha, consumed by the V4 project, allocates its brightest minds to 2027, leaving 2026 as a development limbo. Pernat shakes his head, calling it a lost year painted with false hope. He's seen this pattern before, teams chasing evolution so hard they forget the present still counts. Toprak knows his debut season might not be about glory but endurance, learning to swim in water already draining from the pool. If Yamaha prioritizes the V4, he mutters to his crew chief, then my fight isn't for wins, it's to stay alive in the story. Marin nods, understanding the unspoken truth. Survival is sometimes the greatest statement. Testing days blur into identical sunsets, the same questions unanswered, the same grip fading by the final lap. The journalist praises adaptability, unaware that each corner feels like a compromise between courage and calculation. Pernat watches, neither gloating nor pitying, merely witnessing inevitability unfold. In this waiting game, time itself becomes the fiercest rival. And as the last Michelin warms on its stand, steaming in the dusk light, the future hovers just beyond reach, close enough to smell, too far to touch. Carlo Pernat doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks to be remembered, his voice carrying the gravity of someone who has buried too many careers under the weight of bad timing. His prophecy about Toprak isn't born from bitterness, but from the hard arithmetic of decades spent watching brilliance collide with bureaucracy. Speed, he often says, is easy to find. Context is what kills you. In the neon glare of MotoGP, he sees patterns others ignore. How politics stars innovation, how promises evaporate faster than tire grip in the midday sun. He's brilliant, Pernat concedes inwardly, but brilliance alone is a fragile weapon here. Toprak embodies everything pure about racing, instinct, flair, rebellion, yet he's stepping into a labyrinth built for patience, not fire. The metaphor fits, the lion entering a room full of mirrors, roaring at reflections that roar back with corporate smiles. Behind Yamaha's press statements lies a quiet war between engineers, sponsors, and expectations, each pulling the strings of destiny in different directions. A little-known detail floats through the paddock. The team's internal analytics predict only a 40% data correlation between the current chassis and the 2027 V4, meaning Toprak's learning curve will reset entirely. Pernat shakes his head at that figure, knowing numbers can forecast failure better than any omen. He's entering MotoGP at the mercy of everything he cannot control, he says, voice low, almost paternal. Still, there's admiration beneath the warning, a reluctant respect for the defiance of youth. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, Pernat muses, but history doesn't forgive impatience. The camera flashes, interviews continue, and time moves like a slow-motion crash. Toprak smiles, calm and unknowable, while beneath that serenity lies a storm of calculation. The master and the prodigy stand on opposite sides of belief, one preaching caution, the other chasing destiny. And in that tension, MotoGP finds its cruel poetry. In the vast theater of MotoGP, belief and reality circle each other like predators, each waiting for the other to blink first. Carlo Pernat stands for the weight of experience, for scars turned into sentences, for warnings written in other men's failures. Across from him stands Toprak Razgatlıoğlu, eyes bright with the conviction of someone who has never accepted the limits drawn by others. I have a new dream, to succeed in MotoGP, to get on the podium, to win the title. It won't be easy, but I believe in it. The words sound almost naive, yet there's a current beneath them, a quiet electricity that makes seasoned reporters pause their pens. Dreams are the only currency I trust. Toprak tells himself before sleep, staring at the faint reflection of his helmet on the window. For Pernat, belief without timing is like traction without temperature, beautiful for a second, then gone. The clash between them isn't personal, it's philosophical. One lives by caution, the other by combustion. Yamaha, caught in between, becomes the stage where faith must prove its physics. A little-known insight emerges from Toprak's simulator data. His braking pressure peaks 7% higher than Quartararo's average, a testament to both his daring and his defiance. Pernat reads that number, sighs, and mutters, he's trying to bend the sport to his will. The metaphor forms itself. Belief is an engine revving beyond its red line, glorious and doomed to detonate. In interviews, Toprak's smile becomes his shield. In private, it's his oxygen. Every lap will be a duel between instinct and probability. Let them doubt, he thinks, tightening his gloves. I've lived my life on borrowed disbelief. Pernat watches the same scene and whispers, courage is magnificent, until it forgets the cost. Between them lies the essence of MotoGP, faith roaring against the cold precision of reality. And whichever wins, the noise will echo for years. Every era in MotoGP ends with a prophecy, and Carlo Pernat hangs in the air like exhaust smoke refusing to fade. His words, half caution and half curse, have already taken on the rhythm of inevitability. He warned us. He saw it coming. That single line, repeated in paddock corridors and press rooms, sounds less like gossip and more like scripture. If Toprak Razgatlıoğlu conquers the chaos ahead, he will rewrite destiny itself, silencing every skeptic, including Pernat. But if he falters, those same words will become epitaphs whispered over slow-motion replays. This is it, Toprak thinks before the test lights go green. Either I prove them wrong, or I become their story. The thought doesn't frighten him. It sharpens him. The Yamaha below vibrates like a restless animal, caught between generations of engineering philosophy. A little-known adjustment on his setup, half a degree less rake, promises quicker turning but punishes hesitation, the kind of balance that mirrors his own gamble. The metaphor comes alive, man and machine walking a tightrope stretched between prophecy and proof. Pernat watches from the pit wall, face unreadable, cigarette burning down like the seconds before truth. MotoGP doesn't forgive optimism, he mutters, eyes tracking Toprak's first lap. The bike arcs through corners with defiance, smoke curling from tires not yet ready to surrender. For a heartbeat, belief outpaces logic. Journalists lean forward, realizing they're witnessing either the birth of vindication or the collapse of a dream. Every prophecy needs a villain, Toprak thinks mid-corner, and I don't mind playing the fool who tried. The lap ends. The paddock holds its breath. Between the echo of applause and the hum of engines cooling, destiny tightens its grip. And as night falls, the prophecy doesn't die. It waits, balanced perfectly on the edge of what comes next.